Arthur Hale stood frozen in the grand marble lobby of Atlantic Voyages Limited, feeling as though the very floor beneath him might give way. The towering glass walls, once a symbol of his ambition, now seemed to sneer down at him, reflecting the hollow defeat etched across his face. The muted hum of the building filled his ears, blending with the dull pounding of his heart. The golden brass lift chimed mockingly as its doors opened, releasing a stream of employees into the lobby. Their polished shoes clicked against the floor, briefcases swinging, voices low with conversations that now meant nothing to him. No one met his gaze. No one offered a word of comfort. Arthur might as well have been invisible. At the heart of the gathering stood Edmund Blake. Tall, confident, and draped in the tailored arrogance of success, Edmund held the floor with effortless ease. His voice, smooth as oiled silk, carried across the marble hall as he addressed the assembled board members and executives. After careful consideration, Edmund declared, his words slicing through the heavy air, we believe it is in the best interest of Atlantic Voyages Limited to part ways with Mr. Hale. His contributions have been noted, but the company must chart a new course. Arthur felt the sting of each word as if they were lashes. His dismissal had been dressed up in corporate niceties, but the betrayal bled through the cracks. No one interrupted. No one challenged Edmund. It was already decided. It had been decided long before Arthur even entered the room. The dismissal letter weighed heavily in his hand. The paper, crisp and official, bore the company seal he had once been so proud to represent. 15 years of relentless dedication, sleepless nights, endless negotiations, and calculated risks, all reduced to a cold, indifferent document. Arthur slowly turned away, his footsteps echoing too loudly as he crossed the lobby. Behind him, murmurs resumed, and the life of the company moved on as if he had never been there. Outside, London greeted him with a slate-grey sky and biting drizzle. The city had always been a place of ambition and struggle, but today it felt merciless. Taxis hissed past on wet streets. The wind snatched at Arthur's coat, pulling it open, exposing him further to the chill. He walked without direction, each step fueled by a potent mix of disbelief, humiliation, and a growing smoldering rage. Every memory of late nights at the office, every hard-won deal, every compromise he had made for the company's good, all of it felt like ashes in his mouth. A small, nondescript cafe caught his eye, its dimly lit windows promising a fragile kind of refuge. Arthur pushed open the door, and a bell tinkled overhead, announcing his entrance. The warmth and rich aroma of fresh coffee wrapped around him, but did little to ease the knot in his chest. He chose a table in the farthest corner, sinking into the chair as though the weight of the world pressed down on his shoulders. His mind churned, replaying the scene over and over. Edmund's smug expression, the carefully orchestrated silence of the board, the cold finality of the letter. Arthur clenched his fists under the table. He had built Atlantic Voyages from a struggling maritime service into one of London's premier shipping empires. He had given everything. And for what? To be cast aside like a relic, unworthy of even a genuine farewell. But deep within the storm of humiliation and fury, something hardened. Something cold and sharp. He would not allow this betrayal to define him. He would not fade quietly into the shadows. No. This was not the end. It was merely the beginning. Arthur Hale would rebuild, stronger and smarter than before. And next time, he would show no mercy. The rain had thickened to a misty veil by the time Arthur emerged from the cafe, the taste of bitter coffee lingering on his tongue. His mind was a tangled storm of wounded pride and reckless determination. Somewhere between anger and despair, a plan began to form, though it was still little more than a whisper in the back of his mind. He pulled his coat tighter around him and made his way down the narrow lanes of Soho, where the streets seemed to close in like conspirators. Neon lights buzzed overhead, flickering against the puddles that mirrored a fractured London. Arthur passed shuttered shops and alleys drenched in shadows, his footsteps quickening without him realizing. He knew he needed help. Real help. And there was only one man who might still owe him enough to listen. Dorian Shaw. The name alone stirred a host of memories Arthur would rather have left buried. They had once been close, back when ambition was still a bright, shared dream between them. But time, greed, and a particularly bitter betrayal had severed their friendship like a rusted blade. Still, Arthur knew Dorian was the sort of man who could get things done, especially things that others would not touch. Finding Dorian would not be easy. His name had become something of a ghost among the circles of power and influence. Some said he had gone underground. Others whispered of private dealings that blurred the line between the legal and the damned. Yet if Arthur was to reclaim his life, he would need to step into the very shadows he once despised. Arthur's search led him to an old pub near King's Cross, a relic from another age, where the smoke hung thick and the regulars guarded their secrets with narrowed eyes and silence. The pub was called the Hollow Crown, and its battered sign swung violently in the wind. Pushing open the door, Arthur stepped inside. The air smelled of wet coats, stale ale, and old grudges. A few heads turned, their gazes sharp and assessing, but most quickly lost interest. Arthur scanned the room, noting every exit, every movement, every unfriendly stare. He approached the bar, where a heavy-set man with a walrus mustache polished a glass with a rag that was dirtier than the floor. Arthur leaned in close. "I am looking for Dorian Shaw," he said quietly. The barman's hand froze for a moment, then resumed its slow, pointless polishing. He jerked his chin towards a shadowy corner at the back of the room. Arthur turned and saw him. Dorian Shaw had changed. His once clean-cut appearance was now rough around the edges, with lines etched deep into his face and a permanent tension in his shoulders. His suit was expensive but carelessly worn, like armor put on too late. He sipped a dark drink and watched Arthur approach with unreadable eyes. "You have got a nerve," Dorian said, his voice low, carrying more warning than welcome. Arthur stood firm. "I need your help." Dorian gave a humorless chuckle and gestured to the chair opposite him. Arthur sat, the weight of everything unsaid hanging heavily between them. "Help," Dorian repeated, swirling the ice in his glass. "After what happened between us?" Arthur leaned forward, his voice steady but fierce. "They took everything from me, Dorian. I am not here to apologize. I am here because you are the only man who understands what it is like to be betrayed by your own." Dorian's eyes narrowed. For a long moment, he said nothing, merely studying Arthur as if trying to decide whether he was worth the risk. Finally he spoke. "There is a price, Arthur. There is always a price." Arthur nodded. "Name it." Dorian smiled, a slow, dangerous smile that hinted at alliances and enemies Arthur had not yet imagined. "Not here," Dorian said, draining his glass and standing up. "Come with me." Without another word, he led Arthur out into the rain-soaked streets, down a maze of alleys where the city's heartbeat thudded low and grim. Arthur followed, feeling the first true tendrils of fear grip his spine. Whatever path he had chosen tonight, there would be no turning back. And deep down he welcomed it. The rain had soaked Arthur to the bone by the time they reached a crumbling warehouse on the outskirts of Camden. The streets here were almost abandoned, lined with graffiti and broken streetlights that flickered like dying fireflies. The warehouse loomed out of the mist, a monstrous hulk of rust and cracked concrete. Dorian pushed open the side door with a grunt, revealing a cavernous interior lit only by a few hanging bulbs swinging in the draft. Shadows crawled along the walls, shifting like restless spirits. Arthur hesitated on the threshold, feeling the heavy air settle around him like a warning. Whatever secrets lay ahead, they would not be easily faced. Inside, a group of figures waited, their faces obscured by the gloom. Dorian led Arthur towards them with the confidence of a man returning to his own court. A tall woman with severe cheekbones and a leather coat stepped forward, her eyes cold and assessing. "This is him?" she asked Dorian without looking away from Arthur. Dorian nodded once. "He is desperate enough." Arthur bristled at the words but said nothing. He knew better than to show weakness in a place like this. The woman introduced herself simply as Raven. No surname, no titles. Just Raven. She and the others were part of something much larger than Arthur had expected. A network of operatives, mercenaries, and exiles who lived in the cracks of society. People who owed loyalty only to survival and each other. Raven studied Arthur a moment longer before speaking. "We have heard whispers," she said. "A company called Valorn Industries. Ruthless. Untouchable. Expanding into everything from biotech to information warfare." Arthur's mouth went dry. Valorn. He knew the name. They had been the shadowy hand behind the collapse of his business, manipulating markets and legal systems until he had nothing left. "They destroyed me," Arthur said, voice hoarse. Raven's lips curled into something between a smirk and a snarl. "Then you already have something we value," she said. "Hate. Real hate." A low murmur of agreement ran through the gathered figures. Dorian placed a hand on Arthur's shoulder, Not comforting, but grounding. They took something from Raven too, Dorian said. Something she can never replace. Arthur looked into Raven's eyes and saw the hollow there. An absence deeper than words. This is not about revenge, Raven said sharply. This is about survival. About evening the scales before they tip beyond saving. Arthur nodded, understanding more with each passing second. This was bigger than personal vendettas. It was war. Raven pulled out a battered laptop and opened a map of London, littered with red dots and crisscrossing lines. Valorn has hidden facilities all over the city, she explained. Research labs. Data vaults. Places no one is supposed to know exist. She zoomed in on one location, a red dot tucked beneath the Thames River. This, she said, tapping the screen, is where they keep their black files. Proof of everything they have done. Evidence powerful enough to bring them down. Arthur felt a jolt of adrenaline course through him. How do we get in? He asked. Raven's smile was grim. That is where you come in. The plan, if it could be called that, was reckless. They would infiltrate the hidden facility during the scheduled maintenance window, a 2-hour gap when external security was weakest. But it would still be crawling with guards and traps designed to neutralize intruders permanently. Arthur's role was crucial. He had insider knowledge. Old contracts, backdoor codes from the days when his company had unknowingly supplied Valorn with tech. Information he had buried in shame, now exhumed out of necessity. You will have exactly one chance, Raven said. If you fail, there will be no rescue. Arthur swallowed hard. The weight of it all pressed down on him, but for the first time in what felt like years, he found clarity within the fear. I am in, he said, voice steady. The room seemed to breathe again, the tension loosening slightly. Raven nodded approvingly and handed him a small device. Sleek, metallic, humming with dormant power. This will get you past the first gate, she said. After that, you are on your own. Arthur pocketed the device and squared his shoulders. Outside, the storm raged harder, rattling the warehouse walls. But Arthur no longer cared. He had a purpose now, a mission burning hotter than any anger or despair he had ever known. As the group dispersed to prepare, Dorian lingered by Arthur's side. You realize, Dorian said quietly, that once you step through that door, there is no normal life waiting for you after. Arthur met his gaze without flinching. There is nothing left for me to go back to, he said. And deep within the crumbling heart of London, a new story began. One written in fire, blood, and the unbreakable will to fight back. The night swallowed Arthur whole as he made his way across the silent docks. In the distance, the River Thames glittered under the weak moonlight, a dark mirror to the secrets that lurked beneath it. Every step towards the access tunnel tightened the knot of anxiety in his chest. The maintenance hatch was hidden behind a stack of rusted shipping containers, exactly where Raven's map had indicated. Arthur crouched low, heart hammering, and tapped the code into the concealed keypad. For a terrifying moment, nothing happened. Then with a soft hiss, the hatch swung open. A wave of cold, stale air hit him as he climbed down the narrow ladder into darkness. The tunnel was little more than a concrete artery, slick with moisture and humming faintly with the vibrations of the city above. Arthur activated a small torch, its pale beam cutting a feeble path ahead. His breath echoed against the walls, each step forward dragging him deeper into Valorn's domain. After what felt like hours, he reached the first security checkpoint. A heavy blast door, wired with scanners and locks that would alert the entire facility if tampered with incorrectly. Arthur's hands shook as he retrieved Raven's device from his pocket. He pressed it to the panel, and tiny lights blinked in response, cycling through ancient code protocols he barely remembered programming years ago. There was a heavy clunk, and the door shuddered open. Arthur exhaled a breath he had not realized he was holding and slipped inside. The facility stretched out before him, a labyrinth of sterile corridors and clinical white walls. Surveillance cameras swiveled lazily, but Arthur stayed in the blind spots, just as Dorian had taught him during their rushed briefing. Room after room passed, each more ominous than the last. Laboratories filled with strange equipment, empty cells with heavy restraints, storage rooms lined with data cores that hummed with hidden sins. Arthur could feel the weight of it all pressing down on him. Every locked door he bypassed, every shadow he dodged, told the same story, of a corporation that had long abandoned any shred of morality in its pursuit of power. At last, he found the Black Archive. It was a simple door at the end of an unremarkable hallway, marked only by a small plaque that read Research Storage 9. No heavy security measures, no cameras. The true protection lay inside. Arthur keyed in the second set of codes Raven had provided. The door slid open silently, revealing a room that seemed utterly at odds with the cold modernity outside. Books lined the walls, thick volumes with cracked spines. Paper files stacked in neat, meticulous piles. Old-world methods of record-keeping, immune to cyber attacks or digital sabotage. In the center of the room stood a glass case, housing a single black drive. Arthur moved towards it, heart thudding louder with every step. He reached out, hands trembling, and a voice cut through the silence. "Step away from the drive." Arthur froze, blood turning to ice. He turned slowly to find a man standing in the doorway, dressed in an immaculate gray suit, his face calm but deadly serious. "I had hoped you would come, Arthur," the man said. His voice was smooth, cultured, and terrifying in its certainty. "You have caused quite a stir." Arthur clenched his fists. "Who are you?" The man smiled slightly. "My name is irrelevant. What matters is that you cannot leave here alive." In a flash, Arthur lunged for the drive, smashing the glass with his elbow. Alarms blared instantly, bathing the room in pulsating red light. The suited man cursed and drew a weapon from beneath his jacket. Arthur dove behind a shelving unit as the first shot rang out, the bullet splintering wood and sending paper flying. Heart pounding, Arthur clutched the drive tightly. He had what he came for. Now he just had to survive long enough to use it. The facility was no longer a silent tomb. Sirens wailed through the corridors, and heavy boots pounded the floors. The exit was now a gauntlet of death. Arthur pressed himself against the wall, calculating. He could not fight his way out. He had to outthink them. Taking a deep breath, he sprinted down a side passage, ignoring the pain in his side where a stray bullet had grazed him. Every second counted now. He triggered a series of emergency locks behind him, sealing doors to slow his pursuers. He doubled back through maintenance shafts and crawlspaces, blood smearing the walls where he touched them. Finally, gasping and half-blind with pain, he emerged back into the main tunnel. The hatch to the surface loomed ahead, open just a crack. He shoved himself up the ladder, ignoring the protests of his battered body, and hauled himself onto the docks. The night air was like a slap to the face, sharp and cold. But he was free. For now. In the distance, a sleek black car peeled away from the shadows and roared towards him. Dorian leaned out the passenger window, shouting, "Get in!" Arthur stumbled forward, clutching the drive to his chest like a lifeline, and threw himself into the back seat. As the car screeched away into the night, he allowed himself a single ragged breath of relief. But deep down, he knew this was only the beginning. Valorn would not forgive. And they would not forget. The car sped through the labyrinthine streets of London, headlights slicing through the misty night. Arthur clutched the black drive tightly, feeling the hum of data beneath his fingertips. Dorian threw him a quick glance from the front seat. "Where to?" He balked over the roar of the engine. Arthur hesitated, then named a location. Safe House Grey. South Bank. Dorian nodded, twisting the wheel hard as they turned down a side street. Behind them, Arthur caught a glimpse of dark vehicles merging into pursuit. Valorn was faster than he had feared. "Hold on," Dorian growled. The chase was brutal. Arthur felt every sharp turn, every swerve around startled pedestrians. The city blurred into a stream of neon and shadow. Just when Arthur thought they would be caught, Dorian pulled into a narrow alleyway, the tires screeching as he killed the lights. They sat in silence, barely breathing. The black cars roared past, oblivious. After a tense minute, Dorian exhaled and pulled back onto the road. 15 minutes later, they arrived at a dilapidated row house tucked between two abandoned factories. The safe house looked deserted, just as it should. Inside, Raven was already waiting. "You got it?" she asked sharply, her eyes flicking to the drive. Arthur nodded and placed it carefully on the battered wooden table. Raven moved quickly, setting up a portable scanner. The drive whirred softly as files began to decrypt. Streams of information poured across the small screen. Names, dates, illegal experiments, unsanctioned operations. "This is enough to bury them," she whispered. Arthur allowed himself a flicker of hope. But something gnawed at him, a cold sensation at the base of his spine. A loud bang shattered the moment. The front door exploded inward, splinters flying. Black-clad Veilorn agents stormed the safe house. Arthur dived for cover as bullets tore through the room. Dorian returned fire, barking orders. Raven grabbed the drive and bolted for the back door. Arthur followed, heart hammering, as chaos erupted around him. They crashed through the back exit into another alley, only to find more agents waiting. "We've been set up," Arthur gasped. Raven's face was grim. "Move." As they ran, Arthur realized the betrayal had come from within. Someone had sold them out. And he was starting to suspect he knew exactly who. The night pressed down on Arthur like a living thing as they sprinted through the twisting alleys. Every shadow seemed to hide another enemy. Raven darted ahead, leading them through a maze of backstreets, her breath short and quick. Dorian caught up to Arthur, his gun drawn and eyes scanning. "We can't outrun them forever," he hissed. Arthur knew it too. Veilorn's forces were closing in, herding them like prey. Up ahead, a crumbling iron staircase offered a way up. Raven motioned frantically. Without hesitation, they climbed, boots clanging against the rusted metal. At the rooftop, the city spread out before them, a grim ocean of lights and smoke. They had a brief second of peace. It shattered instantly. From the far side of the rooftop, a figure emerged. Tall, poised, wearing a long dark coat that flapped in the cold wind. Arthur's stomach dropped. It was Commander Holt. Once, Holt had been Arthur's mentor, a man he trusted above all others. But now, the expression on Holt's face was cold, almost clinical. "You disappoint me, Arthur," Holt said, voice carrying easily over the rooftop. "I taught you to be better than this." Arthur's fists clenched. "You taught me to fight for the truth, not to cover up your crimes." Holt sighed as if Arthur were a foolish child. "The truth is a luxury we cannot afford." Behind Holt, more agents appeared, surrounding them. Raven muttered under her breath, "We're trapped." Dorian glanced at Arthur, waiting for a signal. Arthur's mind raced. They could try to fight, but they were badly outnumbered. Escape seemed impossible. Still, surrender was not an option. Arthur raised his voice. "You betrayed everything we stood for." A flicker of something crossed Holt's face. Regret? Doubt. It was gone in an instant. "I built Veilorn to protect our future," Holt said quietly. "Sometimes, sacrifices are necessary." Arthur stepped forward, standing between his friends and Holt. "You're wrong. And I'll prove it." Holt's eyes narrowed. He gave a tiny nod. The agents raised their weapons. A single heartbeat of silence. Then the rooftop exploded into chaos. Arthur dived, grabbing Raven and Dorian, dragging them behind an old ventilation unit as bullets tore the night apart. The drive was still in Raven's pack, their only proof. They had to protect it at all costs. As they crawled towards another fire escape, Arthur realized something chilling. Holt did not want to kill him. Not yet. He wanted Arthur alive. For something far worse. The cold metal of the fire escape bit into Arthur's hands as they scrambled down into the dark alley below. The echoes of gunfire faded behind them, but the danger was far from over. Raven panted, clutching the rucksack tight to her chest. "We need somewhere safe," she gasped. Dorian scanned the alley, then pointed. "There. That old workshop." They sprinted towards a derelict building, its windows boarded up and its sign half torn. Dorian forced the door open, and they slipped inside. Dust hung in the air like smoke. The only light came from a flickering street lamp outside, casting long trembling shadows across the floor. Arthur bolted the door and turned to face the others. "We need to see what's on the drive," he said. Raven pulled out the small device, her hands trembling slightly. She found an old laptop among the junk, surprisingly still functional with a bit of coaxing. The screen glowed weakly as the drive connected. At first, the files seemed meaningless. Lines of code. Technical blueprints. Financial records. Then Raven found a hidden folder, buried deep. She clicked it open. Images filled the screen. Arthur leaned closer, heart hammering. They showed laboratories, strange experiments, people trapped in glass chambers. Notes scribbled in frantic handwriting. Timetables. names. And at the center of it all, a project labeled Nova Eden. What is this? Dorian whispered, his face pale. Arthur scrolled through more files. Nova Eden was not just about control. It was about re-engineering society itself. Selective breeding, genetic modification, the elimination of undesirable traits. It was monstrous. Worse still, there were lists of targeted individuals. Dissidents. Scientists. Even innocent families. People marked for reassignment or elimination. Arthur's stomach churned. We have to expose this, he said hoarsely. The world has to know. But even as he spoke, a low mechanical hum filled the room. Raven's eyes widened. They're here. Through the gaps in the boards, Arthur saw the gleam of drones, scanning the streets, their searchlights cutting through the night like blades. No time to think. No time to plan. Arthur grabbed the laptop and the drive. Move. Now. They burst through the back door into the maze of alleyways once again, the city's cold breath clawing at their skin. As they ran, a chilling realization sank deep into Arthur's bones. Holt and Valorn were willing to destroy anyone who stood in their way. And now, Arthur, Raven, and Dorian were at the top of their list. The city stretched before them, a tangle of rooftops and narrow alleys, cloaked in mist and neon haze. Every corner seemed to whisper of danger. Every shadow could be an enemy. Arthur led them through the labyrinth, feet pounding on wet cobblestones. Raven clutched the laptop to her chest, while Dorian kept watch behind them, the tension in his body like a coiled spring. They reached a crumbling train station, abandoned and silent. Ivy crawled over the cracked walls, and broken glass littered the platform. A single, rusted locomotive sat forgotten on the tracks. This way, Arthur hissed, motioning towards a maintenance tunnel. It was dark, but it was their best chance to move unseen. Inside the tunnel, the air was damp and heavy. Their footsteps echoed as they crept forward, every sound magnified tenfold. Somewhere above them, the city roared on, oblivious to their flight. At last, they emerged into a side street near the heart of the city. The towering headquarters of Valorn loomed just blocks away, its glass facade gleaming like a dagger pointed at the sky. Arthur knew they had only one shot. They had to broadcast the evidence across the city's networks before Holt and his enforcers closed in. Raven pulled out a battered transmitter device, connecting it to the laptop. She worked fast, her fingers a blur. Arthur and Dorian stood guard, eyes scanning the empty street. Suddenly, a low hum filled the air. From both ends of the street, black armored vans screeched to a halt. Figures poured out, masked soldiers in tactical gear, weapons raised. Hands where we can see them, barked a voice through a megaphone. Arthur cursed under his breath. No way out. Dorian stepped forward, hands raised, trying to buy them time. We surrender, he shouted. Arthur leaned towards Raven, whispering urgently. Just a few more seconds. Sweat dripped down Raven's brow as the progress bar inched forward, each second feeling like a lifetime. The soldiers closed in. A shot rang out. Dorian cried out and fell to one knee, clutching his side. Arthur's heart twisted, but he forced himself to stay focused. Hurry, Raven. The transmission bar reached 98%. More shots. Bullets sparked off the walls around them. Arthur grabbed a discarded metal sheet, holding it up as a shield. Raven let out a strangled gasp. Done. She slammed the enter key. Instantly, the data exploded across the network. Screens in shop windows, public displays, even people's personal devices, all flashing the horrific truth about Nova Eden. The soldiers faltered, confusion rippling through their ranks as civilians poured into the street, faces lit by the damning images now flooding the city. Holt's grip on the city was crumbling before their eyes. Arthur seized Raven's hand. Run! Together, they dashed into the chaos, leaving behind the wreckage of Holt's perfect facade.